Hey y'all, any of you guys watch baseball? Any of you guys hang out with baseball guy who really loves baseball and you watch a game with him and then you see something happen and you go, "What is that?" And they say, "Oh, that's like an unwritten rule of baseball." And you kind of look around like, "I thought baseball had rules that were like written down and stuff." All right, so hey guys, it's Ben the Coin Geek at Old Pueblo Coin, and actually that little analogy has to do with what we're going to talk about today, which are there's a lot of theories about what are the unwritten rules of coin grading, and a lot of them I think I would call mythology, and there are a few things that I think are pretty accurate, and there are some things that are historical. So historically, for example, there were certain grading companies that you definitely didn't want to send certain types of coins into. In other words, especially when it came to toning. And this still can be the case sometimes. I still have people that tell me, don't send certain toned coins to PCGS, but send them to NGC, or vice versa, where they'll just say, that type of coin should only go to company A and not to company B. And so this is like an unwritten rule of baseball, right? There's these little things that when I talk to other dealers, they'll say stuff, and I'll say, really? Is that a thing? So we're going to unpack just a couple of those today and talk a little bit about what's a thing and what's not a thing, right? So what's a thing? Do certain people get better grades than other people? Do other people get slaughtered because there's somebody that the grading companies don't like? This is a unwritten rule that I think I would call on its face, I'd call it a myth. This is kind of like watching a baseball game or basketball game and just assuming that every last ref in the game is on the take, right? Like that's what you'd have to assume for this to be true. I think generally NGC and PCGS are both fair and equitable, and generally they don't know whose coins they're looking at. Now, does that mean that you can't have an event or a case where somebody knows somebody? Certain coins, obviously at the walkthrough level, if you're paying $400, $500 or more to get a coin graded, the graders at the top know kind of what's going on, right? It's to me that's pretty clear that a lot of that is not anonymous. And there's the human element, right? Which is to say, definitely things can happen. But I know PCGS and NGC both work hard to make sure that their graders are not, taking bribes or anything. So I'm going back to that sports analogy, that you don't have refs that are taking bribes. Generally speaking, as much as you hate the officiating, I don't think the guys are actually on the take. Just sit down and watch the game from the perspective of someone who's neutral, and you'll hear both fans complaining on both sides. The officiating is actually pretty good when you hear both sides complaining quite a bit, right? So I don't think that people actually get better grades based on who they are. Now, an unwritten rule of baseball here of coin grading that I think is somewhat true, once again getting back to human psychology, is what would be called in psychology anchoring, which is to say, if you send in a group of coins, if you have them progressively change in quality, you're basically training the person's eye to go up in value, right? So in other words, you start with a coin that's kind of a nice AU, and then you go to a coin that might be cleaned, but you're not sure they call it cleaned, and then you go to a coin that's really nice. If they get to see those coins in that order, which by the way, that's an if, because I don't know that they always see the coins in the same order, but if they do, you naturally make comparison from one coin to the next, right? You're going to do that. You would do that, I would do that, we all do that. That's just basic human nature. And so human nature always comes into play when you talk about these things, right? So we get back to the idea of artificial intelligence and grading right away whenever I talk about stuff like that. So that's a whole nother can of worms right there. So let's see. Unwritten rules. This unwritten rule is probably a written rule, really. NGC and PCGS can deny service to anybody they want to. So if you're sending stuff off and you're just being obnoxious, like you just want to punish them by sending them 10,1987 pennies and say, here, grade all these for me. They have the right to take your money and use it, or they also have the right to deny you service. Also, if you are always sending in submissions and filling out the submission forms, right, they can kick you out of the club, right? They can just say, sorry, we can't really help you with this. So this is probably in the fine print. So I don't know if it's an unwritten rule, but I'd consider it to be an unwritten rule. But I've heard stories of people getting kicked out of the club, so to speak. So NGC and PCGS can deny service to anyone they choose to. Unwritten rule: do coin companies grade coins better depending on which service you use? In other words, if I use just like the economy service, am I not going to get as good or as accurate grades as if I use the standard service or the express service? This I find to be an interesting one. A lot of people have theorized about this. I don't think that this is true at all. I think that generally speaking, because we use all the services, and I don't know that I've ever gotten better grades by sending something in at the more expensive rate. That just has not worked for me at all. So that is an unwritten rule, which I think is generally false. An unwritten rule that I think is generally true is what's called the net grade. Now, the net grade, so you'll see old coins that actually have a net grade to them, right? So Annex will do this, where they'll tell you there's a net grade. It's an AU, but it's been clean, net grade, XF, something like that, which is kind of an interesting idea. PCGS and NGC, I believe, both will put a net grade on a coin. And by that, I mean, it doesn't say net grade. It does not say net grade. It actually just has a grade on it. So you have a coin that looks really stunning, and you look at it and you think, from a distance, this is a 64, 65 all day long. Beautiful, beautiful coin. And yet it'll be graded well below that, like a 61 or 62. So there seems to be some type of obvious problem with this coin, right? And so at first you think there's an obvious problem with the grading or the grader. But when you look closer, sometimes you'll find like a very small staple mark or something. And it became a judgment call with the grader. I can either call this coin Unk Details scratched, or I can go ahead and take that mark for what it is and move this coin back down from an MS65 to an MS62. And that's what I call a net grade, and other dealers call a net grade. They're net grading the coin. Same thing can be true for a coin that is borderline on whether or not it's been cleaned. It just has a look to it that they're not sure about. But the rest, there's not a lot of contact marks, but maybe it's missing some of the eye appeal. You'll see a coin get knocked down sometimes for that. That is the net grade, right? Here's another one that's a unwritten rule. This is an unwritten rule. I'm going to call this for someone submitting coins. I don't have statistical proof for this, and y'all can just call me an idiot for this one. But just so you know, if you're sending a coin in for grading, and there's a huge price jump from like 62 to 63, your coin's going to come back at 62. That is an unwritten rule of coin grading, right? If you need the coin to be a 65, it will be a 64. You know, the theory behind some of this as well, you know, that the graders know the price points and jumps. I think that's probably true for someone who's really, really experienced, you know, as far as, you know, what kind of where the price points are. But I'm just telling you right now, if you got a coin and you need it to make that next grade, it won't. Okay, so that is an unwritten rule of coin grading. All right, there's some historical things also for you to be aware of with coin grading. I don't know if I want to call them unwritten rules, but maybe an unwritten rule is, you know, there are older fat NGC holders that have coins marked dimple that today would never qualify as a dimple. So you got to be careful with that type of stuff. And also when it comes to toning, there are certain types of toning that, the coin grade, I kind of mentioned this earlier a little bit, that the coin grading companies like or don't like, and they liked differently historically. So here's the thing, once again with a sports analogy, you know, the game is reffed very different than it used to be, like all of them basically, right? But for basketball, for example, the rules literally have changed, right? Same with football, the rules literally have changed over time. Grading is a lot like that too. So you can look back over time and find certain types of toning that were considered to be attractive back in the day that are not today. And you know, also what's true, just as much as I can say that certain coins are going to be marked dimple in old holders that aren't, also something you should be aware of is that if you get older holders, coins that may be a nice cameo proof, there's a chance that it doesn't say cameo on it because they didn't put cameo on the holders back then. So not so much a unwritten rule per se, but just a historical perspective on how some of the things have changed. So those are things for those of you who are not sending coins in to get graded, but are actually looking at graded coins to be aware of. Be careful of NGC holders, the old fatties that say dimple, and on the other hand, you can look for old coins that look cameo but don't say cameo, and that's something else that is a real thing in the marketplace if you're kind of hunting and pecking and looking for stuff. So anyways, let me know which one of the unwritten rules of coin grading I missed out on, or other ones that you've experienced. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Ben the Coin Geek. You can subscribe by clicking on the owl button in the corner and watch more videos on the right side of the screen. Thanks.